here this morning, this morning or afternoon, depending where you are. I'm Nadia Oseguera. I am going to be hosting today's call with Shannon, who will be on shortly. So to kick off today's call, we do want to take a moment to acknowledge the significance of today, September 11th. We want to take this moment to thank the first responders and other service members who provided support and aid during the attack, and also remember those who were lost on September 11th. If anybody would like to name anybody that is on their mind today, please feel free to drop that in chat, or you can also unmute. So I will pause for just a moment to give time in case anybody would like to unmute and share. Well, and thank you to Lawrence for your service. Lawrence is going to be our presenter today, but I just wanted to take that moment to thank you. So I'm actually going to pass it over to my co-host, Shannon. We'll switch gears just a little bit for our question of the day. Shannon?
Yes, today's question of the day is, what factors influence the selection of your pet? For me, with our most recent dog, it was the fact that he was unwanted by anyone else. His eyes were a little too far apart from what should be normal, and he was also the runt of the litter. So that is why we adopted him, and he and I just kind of bonded immediately. I'm seeing some answers here. The animals chose them. Yes. Foster cat fail. I don't know, maybe that should be renamed. I don't think those are necessarily fails. Oh, gave birth under the bed. That is great. The longest stay, and then falling in love with the longest stay. That's great. My wife adopted me and she already had her dog. I hope that you all got along well. The blended family. Oh, amputation nurse. Fostering, yes. Awesome. Continue sharing those. And I will pass it back over to Nadia for updates.
Thanks, Shannon. I'll say mine are all misfits, so I think they fit in perfectly here. So for national updates, we're actually going to have Amber with Maddie's Fund kick it off with some prize announcements.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. I've never chosen a pet. I've legit just had them given to me, or like my house right now, I showed up and there was two cats here, so it seemed really rude to ask them to leave, so I told them to come inside instead. But on that happy note, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will announce the winners for our community conversations calls, and for the Maddie's Pet Forum. Can everyone see this? The August 2023 prize winners?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. So first off, for the weekly community conversations, we have one winner for $5,000, and that is Kathy Duncan from Humane Canada, which is in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. So Kathy, I think I saw you on the call this morning. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Amber. We're so excited. Thanks to Maddie for sure. We are thrilled to be chosen, and we're going to use this money. We've just started planning for and designing a new learning center. And so, we're finding, shockingly, that putting together content that we don't already have, because we've got lots of content to put in there, but we're looking at things we could add, costs a bit of money. So we're going to devote this money absolutely to our new learning center and the content we hope to roll out.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see what you do with that and take advantage of learning from what you've done as well. Thanks so much, Kathy.
Thank you. We're really excited.
Yay. I know it's like, how many calls have you been on and you finally won? So, pays to keep showing up.
Absolutely. I had to share with my leadership team. I said, I've been on these calls for like 2 years, and
Yeah.
every time I submit my name, I just keep doing it. Do. And finally, here we are. And we got to win 5,000. We got the whole month. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Kathy. We always love seeing you on these calls.
Thanks very much, Amber.
All right. So my next prize is for the Maddie's Pet Forum. And this is one winner of $3,000. And for this month, we have Kay Crawford for Little Traverse Bay Humane Society, which is in Harbor Springs, Michigan. Is Kay on the call? No. Well, I know that Kay has been sharing some great stuff on Maddie's Pet Forum, and I also know that Little Traverse Bay Humane Society in Harbor Springs is very close to where my parents live now, and they're doing some great work out there. So congratulations to our winners this month. Irene is going to go ahead and drop the I'm going to stop sharing. And Irene is going to go ahead and drop the links so you can all go ahead and have a chance to win next month. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Amber, and congratulations to our winners. So I can also give a couple more minutes if anybody wants to give any other updates for national updates. You can either drop them in the chat or you can unmute.
So it's Kathy from Canada again, everybody. Just a reminder that our call for speakers for the 2024 Humane Canada Summit for Animals, which will be held in beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia, is ending tomorrow, Tuesday, September 12th at noon Eastern. So please take a moment. Okay, Vincent, I see you. I'm submitting. Yeah, well, you better do it soon, dude. We want to see you there. Absolutely submit your abstract so that we can have a chance to have you there as a speaker.
Sweet.
Hi, this is Amber Frywald with Maddie's Fund. The applications are open for Maddie's online instructor-led courses. I'm going to drop a link. Definitely check out what we have to offer, which this time we have 10 different educational opportunities. So applications will close on the 13th of this week. So everybody apply, and looking forward to seeing all of your faces. Thank you.
Hello, this is Vincent, the Maddie's Director of the Human Animal Support Services Project. Reminder, tomorrow, please register for our webinar tomorrow, which will be all about transport. We'll have Claire Collison and also Lindsay Hamrick from HSUS. So please, I'll put the link in the chat and please register.
Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Comas from HSUS. I wanted to remind everybody to save the date for May 15th through 18th for Animal Care Expo 2024 in San Antonio, Texas. And we have a lot of information up on our website, and registration will be opening in the coming months. And I'll drop the link in the chat.
Hey, any others? I don't see anyone unmuting. I'll just drop a quick update. The California for All Animals program is launching our grant cycle applications on the 15th at 7 a.m. Pacific time. This grant opportunity is open to animal shelters based in California, as well as animal control agencies. If you're a foster-based organization and want to engage with this opportunity, we do have some information on our website with recommendations for partnering with your local animal shelter. So I can drop the link in the chat too. And then just a few more seconds if anyone wants to jump in quickly.
So I'm with Texas Unites, and we are still accepting speakers for the next week. I'll if anybody wants to come speak in Austin in April, that would be amazing. We're just still looking for speakers at the Texas Unites conference. Oh, I don't know how to do it though. paste. There we go.
Alrighty, well, feel free to keep dropping announcements in the chat, and I'm going to hand it back to Shannon to introduce our wonderful speaker.
I am very excited to share or introduce our speaker today, Lawrence Minnis. He is currently the Director of Workforce Development at the Humane Rescue Alliance, and I will put his references cited in the chat, and I will let him get started with his presentation, Top Dog Adoption Decision-Making Factors on Community Conversations today.
All right, well, thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Shannon, for hosting today, and thank you for that introduction. I want to thank everyone here. I've seen a lot of faces that are here in support. There's going to be a lot of content today. I'm going to sort of steamroll through all of our slides and try to have some time at the end for questions. But please feel free to drop questions in the chat because I anticipate a lot of questions that'll be popping up. So for today, I will be presenting some of my research and some of my ideas about what your shelter visitors and potential adopters are thinking, and getting into the research behind shelter adoption decision-making when it comes to dogs. I am with the Humane Rescue Alliance, but at the same time, and what I've been doing for the past several years has been a graduate student at George Mason University, studying psychology and focusing on cognitive and behavioral neuroscience. The research lab that I'm a part of is focused on animal learning and animal behavior. And my personal research interest sort of tied the animal learning and behavior into my business background and my connection with the shelters. So I wanted to look into shelter adoption decision-making over the course of my graduate studies. And my master's thesis, which you'll also have a link to in the chat, was published just last year under the Journal of Animal Welfare Science. And you'll be able to connect to it through the slides, which will be provided later, in addition to the link in the chat as well. So I just wanted to delve into a bit of the background behind what adoption decision making research has shown over the last 20 years. It's been going on for at least 30, probably a little over 30 years, but it's really picked up since the 2000s, especially focused on the decision-making processes of shelter visitors as well as adopters. And so we'll start with the premise that a potential adopter walks into your shelter and wants to look at adoptable dogs. So research tells us a bit about the behavior of that visitor or that potential adopter, and that shelter visitors are going to spend about 60 seconds, more accurately 66 seconds at each kennel, and be interacting with the dogs at the different kennels for approximately 20 seconds on average. They'll, on average, again, spend about 20 minutes in total at the shelter. So it's a pretty short and pretty quick process that they're going through. And that time will change based on the layout, based on the size of the number of animals available. But this just goes to show through research that people are coming on site, similar to what you may have seen in your shelters, and they're moving through the process. It'll be a little bit longer if they find an animal that they want to interact with, but your typical visitor is going to spend about 20, maybe 25 minutes on average at the shelter, just looking through the kennels. Other decision-making research has highlighted that age, appearance, such as coat length or coat color, the size of the dog, as well as the breed of the dog, are key factors for the adoption decision. And that they've argued that those potential factors can possibly be used to predict adopters from non-adopters, or those that won't that'll visit the shelter and won't adopt. But other research has shown, looking at different avenues or different parts of the process, that behavior is the biggest adopted concern for those pre-acquisition, before they end up adopting a dog. And we have all seen in our shelters through the data that's come from those that are surrendering their animals, that behavior is one of the primary reasons for relinquishment to the shelter. So when you're looking at the research, it tells us these different things, but it doesn't tell you why we see that behavior is important sort of pre-acquisition, but for the decision making, for the adoption decision, the data is showing that age and size and breed are important. And then afterwards, post-adoption, behavior becomes important again. We see this trend, but we don't get a great explanation why. And then this doesn't do a great job of informing our adoption strategies, so we can try to tune our model to better fit the behaviors and the decision-making process of potential adopters and their shelter visitors. So when we're looking at the model, we haven't seen much innovation because we haven't had a chance to get much information about that process itself. So I have this TV, and if you're old enough like I am to have had this type of TV, this TV antenna, this antenna TV, you're probably laughing and remembering all of the things you would do to this TV just to get the picture quality so you can see the show that you're looking for. One of the main things that people will probably highlight, especially in the chat, are the bunny ears and the antennas, how you'll mess with the antennas, extend them, or even put foil or paper clips on them just to try and enhance the signal and get everything set in. So it goes from the fuzzy screen to the show that you're looking for. But they'll also tell you that over time, it'll fade back. And so you end up playing this game of making modifications to the model so it hones back in again, and then it'll fade back out and come back in. Ultimately, I'm using this as an analogy for our shelter adoption strategies because the model has roughly stayed the same over the several decades. And we've made modifications to the adoption procedures and policies and how we're using it, but the model has stayed roughly the same. And we've probably made enough modifications to max it out. And we need a new model, much like if you still have that TV, you'll probably need a new TV. Well, when you're looking for a new TV, that learning and new knowledge is essential for picking that new model, so you know what is best fits for you and how you're going to be using it. So when it comes to a TV, you should be looking at the pixels, the refresh rate, the type of screen it is, and the color saturation, all of these different factors to really understand what the best fit is for you and how you'll be able to maximize the new model that you choose. Well, it comes to the same thing when we're talking adoption strategy. So for the adoption strategy, we need to understand the function of information. What are we providing and how is it being used? We need to understand the decision-making process that potential adopters are going through and know where we're targeting to have an impact. We also need to understand the client behaviors and what they'll be doing before they reach the shelter, when they reach the shelter, and even after they've left, whether they've adopted or not adopted, so we can better model our adoption strategies to suit their behaviors. And we have a decent understanding of demographics, but we need to overlap those demographics with some of those behaviors and other things that we see. So again, the research hasn't informed that. The practical side hasn't innovated as much as we would like for a new model. And when I looked through the research, I had overarching questions. What is the decision-making process for dog adoptions, as well as what are the potential factors that are considered by those potential adopters when they're at a public adoption site or they come to a shelter? And so from there, I took these questions and did my own my master's thesis, looking at the top decision-making factors for potential adopters that come to shelters as well as public events. And I also wanted to get an understanding of what their search was like. Where were they when they were coming to the shelter or an adoption site, a public event? Where were they in their search process? So I went to 5 different shelters scattered throughout the DC, Maryland, Virginia, excuse me, area, and also included public adoption events in DC and in Maryland. I tried to intentionally change up the demographics to be all encompassing as much as I could for the area that I was focused in. And I did this through June of 2019 into November 2019, pre-pandemic. And you can get more detailed information by linking to my article through the Journal of Applied Animal Welfare Science. And if you really want to get a lot more detailed information and the arguments that I make, you can actually access my thesis through the repository that should also be linked in the chat as well. Now the thesis itself is about 79 pages. About 15 of those are just the references, but there's a lot more detailed information that also goes into the theory that I've been working on for the past probably 5 or 6 years now. Now, from that research, I spent about 80 hours across all of those various sites collecting surveys. And I collected about 551 surveys, 34 of which I had to exclude because people didn't follow directions or they didn't fill out any information. So when I went to do my statistical analysis, I analyzed 517 of those surveys. When I asked the question, what were their top 3 decision-making factors, and they could select up to 3, they can select 1 if that was what they wanted to highlight. Behavior, as you see in this graphic, behavior stood out far and beyond all the other factors. Age followed. You also see size and breed and lifestyle fit more important. But as you'll see in this next slide, behavior was above and beyond the most important decision-making factor for potential adopters when they're looking at a dog adoption at a shelter or at an adoption event. And it was the only one where more than half of the participants selected that factor. And it was selected nearly 20% more than the second highest factor, which was age. And the other amazing part about this is no matter the location or all of the different demographic groups, it was pretty much the same. Behavior was the top, followed by age, size and lifestyle fit and breed kind of flip-flopped in order, but there were still the top 5. But behavior is by far the biggest factor for an adoption decision, where we go back to the data that has been shown over the past 20 years that I mentioned to start. And we'll ask why. Well, before I address the why, I have to put on my neuroscience hat, and we'll get into a little bit of the neuroscience, but not get too deep and have everybody, sort of back in high school science class. But I just want to touch on some things I want you to understand. So as I'm talking through the why, you'll really be able to tap into a true understanding behind the behaviors. So we have limitations to our attention. We have limitations to what we can perceive, and we also have limitations to our energy level. So we are constantly working to navigate the world by allocating just enough energy and attention to do it successfully. Our environment impacts how we allocate our attention and our perception, and stress levels impact those as well. So all of that comes to bear when we are dealing with decision making and when we're looking at options and trying to think through as efficiently as possible which option we should choose or when we want to make a decision. Most of all, when we're looking to decide something and evaluating things around us, we face a lot of uncertainty, and it's especially so when it comes to animals in the shelter. So that uncertainty, we look to mitigate it as best as possible or to limit it as best as possible. And if we can't, we look to avoid as much uncertainty as we possibly can. Research has shown that we will take on large risks because risks are a known commodity. We are able to quantify them and able to understand or predict the percentage or the likelihood of something occurring, where uncertainty or ambiguity, we have no known information. It is a complete unknown where we're not really able to predict. And so because we're facing uncertainty and we don't have the knowledge or that to really inform us, we rely on emotions. That gets to that gut feeling that you may have, and it gets to heuristics. And when I say heuristics, that means those mental shortcuts that you may take in order to navigate things and make a decision. And one example I'll give is if you are at the grocery store looking to get cereal, there are dozens upon dozens of options in the shelf. It would be take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy to go to each box to look at the nutritional value and the ingredients to see which is the healthiest option that you want to choose. We use heuristics by saying, okay, if it says whole grain on it and it has a flavor that we like, then that's the healthy one that we want to choose. That doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy, but again, it's the heuristic, it's the shortcut we use so we're not there for hours just trying to pick a box of cereal. So going back to how we're evaluating the adoptable animals and why the research may have shown that age and breed and size and some of those other factors besides behavior may be important or were reported as being important, it's because they're easily identifiable and they may allow us to infer about the other areas that may be of concern. So we may look at age and we may be able to consider things that relate to behavior or relate to their medical status. Or we may relate to size and be able to infer about the cost that it may take to care for that animal or the amount of stress and amount of energy it may take to manage that animal at home. Or breed, especially when it comes to the behavior and training or the fit at the household. It's why you likely have a lot of conversations about the pit bull, the bully type dogs, is because people are relying on heuristics. And so your heuristics are going to be informed by what they hear, sort of the easiest information that's available, and they will jump right to that. So again, back to the neuroscience, they're mitigating uncertainty by paying attention to all of those easily identifiable factors because they're easily to capture and easily to compare. And sometimes the information for behavior especially isn't available, or if it is, it's really dense and takes a while to try and process, where it's easier to look and select and infer based on some of the other easily identifiable areas. And that goes to the economy of our resources, making sure we're not overextending ourselves as far as attention or energy, because you consider how long do we want to tolerate or deal with that stress and that evaluation process. And that comes into play, as well as the emotional side and the heuristics. When it comes to emotions, again, age plays a part in that, because with the younger dogs, we get the cuteness effect. And that cuteness effect is similar to babies, where puppies and kittens tend to have rounder heads and bigger eyes and so be bioengineered to give us that sweet awe effect. So and that's really facilitated so it can generate attachment. I mean, that's literally engineered to generate attachment. So that's also why we see a lot of younger dogs and cats even being scooped up very quickly, but the older dogs, which have that cuteness effect kind of worn off, take a little bit of time. So when we go back to the adoption strategy and we look and say, okay, well, how does the model deal with this? How does it relate to the behaviors that I just covered? Well, I've had several conversations with folks over the past few months, and I typically hear that we have more of a retail style or retail model for our animal adoptions and our dog adoptions. And during those conversations, I have repeated the term realtor, having a realtor model, and moving towards that. And so the differences between them, as I put them on this spectrum, the retail model, you have the clients going through the search process in the early stages of the decision process independently. They're doing it themselves and they don't have a lot of support from their staff, Think about it again, when you're going to the grocery store, going clothes shopping, you go around and you look around. You don't encounter staff really unless you have a question or you are close to the decision point, you've made a selection and you are ready to close out that process. So the staff members are waiting. They are far further back in the process, waiting towards the tail end before they get to step in and be involved. The realtor model is a bit different. Now think of a realtor when you're looking for a home. The realtor captures the clients a little bit earlier in the search and decision-making process. And so they're helping them throughout the process. They're advising the clients and helping them navigate all the uncertainty, all of their questions in order to reach that decision. So ultimately, that realtor becomes a resource for that client. So back when we look at that spectrum, and again, within those conversations that I've had, I've heard, again, it's acknowledged that we're at a retail model and that maybe we should go towards something closer to a car sales model. But it does make sense, but I caution it. And the reason why is because, yes, we do in a car sales model, car sales models engage clients a little bit earlier than the pure retail model in the search and decision process. And they advise them and try to help them and support them to make that decision. But many of us who have bought cars here in the audience know that you kind of get the feeling, and that you have the reputation of a car salesman, that they might not be looking for the best fit for that client. They may just be pushing to get to that end point. So you don't ever want to be buying a car and feel like they're trying to push you to take a car off the lot. And that's what makes it not the best model for animal adoptions or for dog adoptions, because we don't want our clientele, our visitors, to feel like we're pushing dogs on them for them to take them from the shelter. We want them to feel like we are helping them find the best fit. Because as soon as we start having that car salesman type of a reputation, then I think we would lose a lot of the traffic that we currently have coming into the shelters. So the current shelter model, I put between the pure retail model and the car sales model, somewhere in that range, where clients are going through the search process. They start online, then they go to the shelter and they look through the kennels. And it's towards the end of that when they're ready to make a selection, or they're asking questions about the adoption process itself, that they encounter our adoption staff. And the staff will then help them through the meet and greets, and then ultimately, right after the meet and greets, are an adoption decision. So our adoption staff is, again, in that retail model where they don't show up until the very end. And we're expecting everyone to go through all of that uncertainty, all of the vetting, all of the evaluation that I talked about earlier, by themselves. I recommend that, it's also highly focused on, the current model is highly focused on the benefit of adoptable animals, i.e. the placement of those animals in homes, making them forever homes. So we get the sense that we may be vetting potential adopters, even though we're trying to get away from that. And we're addressing that by trying to reduce barriers and change adoption policies to make them to be able to facilitate more adoptions. But the issue is that strategy targets the shelter's decision making and how the shelter is dealing with uncertainty. It has no impact on the decision-making process that the clients, that our shelter visitors and potential adopters are going through. So again, we're looking for them to still go through that long search process, dealing with the uncertainty to come to some decision at the end when we step in to help them. I recommend that we move towards a target model being a realtor-based, where our adoption staff would engage clients, engage potential adopters earlier in the search and decision-making process, and then help cultivate relationships where they can advise all those potential adopters and shelter visitors before they arrive, and be a resource for them, and really be set up to ultimately, instead of looking for the placement of the animal, be focused on helping all the potential adopters navigate uncertainty through that decision-making process. And by helping them through that process, ultimately, we will end up helping the animals and their placement. Now, in order to do that, we really have to understand, again, what the decision-making process is and who our shelter visitors are, not just the potential adopters. So I'll rhetorically ask, do you understand who your shelter visitors are? Do you keep foot traffic metrics where you know how many people are coming in and out of your site each and every day? Do you have data or charts or graphs that show the overlap between traffic and the time of day or the day of the week or the time of the year? Or do you even collect information related to where they may be in their search and decision process? Because if we're not, then we have very little information to go on with our shelters, and that's where we're going to really have to start. And it's important because what their behaviors are impacts how we try to model and tend to them. So for shelter visitors, most of you may know that shelter visitors tend to come from research, from the research that I have done and some of the studies I've been involved with, even going back to 2001, that shelter visitors typically come from multi-member households compared to, and are large part multi-member households compared to single-member households. And therefore, when they're visiting, we also see them visiting in pairs or groups compared to visiting our sites alone. Now, those don't mean a one-for-one correlation. They may be overlap, but through my time, again, I spent 80 hours on site talking with folks going through the shelters. A lot of times it would be with family or friends or roommates. Sometimes it would be with coworkers or just colleagues that they want to have help support them through that process while they're searching. And that, again, goes back to our current model where they are they're bringing on their own advisory group and their support group so they can navigate the uncertainty and make a decision in order to reach a decision. And they don't see our adoption staff as a resource for them to get to that decision until the very end. Also, when they're coming to the shelter, they're not targeting typically specific dogs or dog or specific dogs. They're sort of looking at their options and seeing the animals that are available. So when we consider this, again, we look at how they're evaluating everything. They need to have robust conversations with multiple members or multiple stakeholders in order to come to some type of consensus. And in our current model, we leave them to do that alone. And when they come and visit, they visit bringing on their own advisors and their own sort of sounding board. And we leave them to do that alone until they get closer to the time where they select a dog. Furthermore, we really need to understand who the shelter visitors are and where they are in their search, because it goes beyond just demographics. And not every visitor to your shelter is a potential adopter, even though we want to look at it that way. The research has shown that about 20 to 30% of your traffic is going to be just visitors, meaning they're not engaged in an active search for an adoptable animal. They're not intending to adopt during that visit. They're not intending to adopt very soon after that visit. They're just there typically for a social outing, to be there with friends or support someone else, or just to have human animal interaction. Again, back to what I stated first, the research shows they're moving from kennel to kennel within a minute, but they're also spending a little bit of time interacting with different animals. So just that ability to interact with other animals may be attracting 20 to 30% of our visitors. Another 40 to 50% can be categorized as browsers and window shoppers, meaning they're actively searching, they intend to adopt, but they don't intend to adopt during that visit. And so they are there to, again, try to go through the decision-making process, the search process, understand what the options are, try to consider a lot of the questions and deal with a lot of the uncertainty that they face, but they don't intend to make an adoption while they're there during that visit. 10 to 25% of the visitors intend to adopt during the visit. And we all know that not everybody intending to adopt that comes to the shelter actually adopts. So at best, from the data that we've collected, 25% are coming with the intent to adopt, and less than a quarter of your traffic may intend or may actually adopt the animal going home. And if you don't know how many folks are flowing in, then you really don't know how many folks are actually being captured, because you could be closer to that 10% and then have less than 10% of your traffic actually go home with animals. And then we have this sort of novel group called spontaneous adopters, which I categorize as people that may be just visitors that adopt, that are interacting, that ultimately end up adopting. They weren't actively searching. They weren't intending to adopt when they arrived, but through the interaction and everything else during that process, they ultimately did adopt. But you see, that's a very small percentage of their traffic, and that may be very subjective depending on a lot of different demographics and circumstances, depending on, again, the marketing strategies, the pricing strategies. I mean, there are a lot of different things that may impact that, and research needs to go investigate why that we may have those spontaneous adopters. And we need to really understand all of these factors about our visitors, so we can look for to develop visitor conversion strategies within that model. Because those that may be coming in, if they don't intend to adopt, we want to be able to help them, again, navigate the decision-making process and get them closer to adopting. Whether they are just visitors, how do we convert them to being spontaneous adopters? And if they're browsers or window shoppers, how do we help them navigate that uncertainty through that adoption decision-making process in order to reach an adoption decision? If not during that visit, that we move them from being a browser to the group where they come very soon after intending to adopt. So a lot of you, I see there are probably a lot of comments, and again, a lot of questions. Maybe the overarching question will be, what's next, or what can we do? How do we move forward? Well, first, I would advise you to evaluate how you're collecting your data and what data you are collecting at your site. Are you accounting for who's visiting, who's coming into your shelter, your adoption sites? Do you grab any data on the visitor count or the demographics that are just visiting, not just adopting? You also want to understand the search parameters. You want to try to investigate why they're coming in. So not only who's coming in, but why they're coming in. And if you can grab that data, then that will inform your ability to fine tune that new model for your adoption strategy and really try to increase adoptions in the future. You also want to evaluate the canine, the data that you have for canine behavior, because as going back to my research and some of the other research, behavior seems to be the #1 decision-making factor for a lot of folks. And in fact, that is what is principally evaluated during the out-of-kennel evaluation. Behavior needs to be made available and digestible to those potential adopters, so we can at least fill in some of those knowledge gaps and eliminate uncertainty, or convert some of that uncertainty to risk, where it's a known commodity that they can then consider and help them reach their an adoption decision. All right, so simply starting there by evaluating those areas, I think we take steps forward in looking at a new model. You can also discuss a realtor-based strategy and the resources that will be needed. And it's just starting a discussion about that, seeing what it would look like, what resources would you need in order to have a realtor-based model where you're reaching out at an earlier point. You also look at the resources that you would provide to all of your clientele, as well as the information that you are providing to them. And you're going to look at where in the decision-making process you may be making that impact. Above all, and this goes to something that is has a personal setting set on it, advocate through Maddie's and through a number of other areas for funding this type of research. There are not a lot of us that engage in adoption decision-making research, and it's few and far between. There have been probably a dozen, maybe 2 dozen studies over the past 2 decades plus. Compare that to studies that have gone into foster programs, into behavior enrichment, and into other areas that have funding. Research pours in there, and we get a lot of innovation and information to help inform strategies at the shelters and with rescues. And funding tends to attract researchers, and the researchers then lead to innovation. So if we want the innovation for the strategy to optimize that new model for our adoption strategy and what we can do to really elevate adoptions for that next step, then we need to push for funding so we can have that. For my research, I did that on my own dime. Again, driving to all of those different locations all of that time was on my dime. But I look at a lot of other colleagues and they benefit from funding and they go to where there is funding. Also, beyond funding, support and partner with researchers that may be in your area or that you may have access to. You can check in with your local universities and the research labs there and see who's doing companion animal or companion pet type of research. George Mason, my research lab, we engage in it, principally led by me. Virginia Tech does it. We have Texas Tech, Arizona State University, even up to Canada and the University of British Columbia. We have a number of universities out there and researchers out there that you can possibly connect with to help and support. And you can take a moment or take a step to consider supporting my upcoming research. Right now, I'm getting into my dissertation phase, and I am set to launch the survey for my dissertation, which is going to be focused on seeing how different information is being used in relation to the adoption decision. So I can really see if what different levels of information about behavior or age will really significantly affect a decision to adopt a dog or not. I'm set to launch that. And if you would like to support me by helping me recruit participants using social media or using your website for them to take an online survey you can connect in the link that may be in the chat, or you can use the QR code and provide your contact information. And after I have everyone, all the contact information and support, I will do a Zoom myself and tell you a bit more about the research that I'm looking to do and how you can support me by using your platform to reach out to your potential adopters. My target is to have 300 participants for this study, but if I get more, then that means there's more analysis and more detail that I can offer the next time we have a discussion like this. I want to thank you for your time. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that you were able to gain something from this. Again, I anticipate a lot of questions, and I will try to answer some here. And if we don't answer a lot of questions, please jump onto the pet forum where we can engage in discussion, and I can answer questions and talk ideas and strategies from there. But thank you again for your time and attention.
Lawrence, that was fantastic. Unfortunately, we are at time, so we'll have to pick up the conversation on the pet forum. I know I was taking a lot of notes, so you will be hearing from me soon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great week. Take care. Thank you, Lawrence. You did fantastic.